UK-Rwanda asylum plan against international law, says UN Refugee Agency. By Doug Faulkner. BBC News. PA Media. The UK's proposal to send some migrants who arrive in Britain on small boats to Rwanda is a breach of international law, the UN's Refugee Agency has said.
In a highly controversial change to UK immigration policy, the government plans to send anyone deemed to be entering the country illegally to Rwanda in East Africa. Boris Johnson claimed the move would set a new international standard for dealing with immigration, but it's been heavily criticised by several charities and opposition parties. The scheme intended to undermine people smugglers will apply to men and women, but not children or families, such as those who arrive here in small boats across the Channel or on lorries, and it'll include those who've come since the beginning of the year. A deal was signed in the Rwandan capital Kigali today, from where our home editor Mark Easton reports.
A handshake in the grip of controversy. This formal agreement between Britain and Rwanda is, according to the Home Secretary, a world first in the approach to dealing with asylum seekers. Men and women arriving in the UK by an unofficial route will have their request for sanctuary ruled inadmissible, classed as an illegal migrant, and could be forcibly relocated 4,000 miles south to rebuild their life in East Africa.
We, as two ministers, stand here today absolutely committed to changing some of the norms around the broken global migration system, because for too long other countries, and by the way naysayers, just sit on their hands and have been watching people die.
The Migration and Economic Development Partnership sees the UK send an initial £120 million for educational projects in Rwanda, in return for the small African state helping deal with what's become a humiliation for ministers who promised to control Britain's borders. Record numbers of asylum seekers arriving across the Channel in small boats.
What's going on here?
The Prime Minister was in Dover today to launch a series of policies designed to show the government getting serious with the problem of people traffickers.
This innovative approach, driven by our shared humanitarian impulse and made possible by Brexit freedoms, will provide safe and legal routes for asylum while disrupting the business model of the gangs.
But the centrepiece of the response is the deal with Rwanda. If it happens, this is where the first of those flown to Kigali will be housed, currently a private hostel.
Is it reserved for people coming from Britain?
That's right.
Today's guided tour also included a meeting with a Yemeni refugee who has successfully made his home in the country.
The weather is really great the whole year, no change. Yeah, I think this is most of the things that I like.
Many, though, have profound concerns about the practicality, the cost and the humanity of this deal. The British government sending often traumatised asylum seekers halfway around the world to rebuild their lives in a country they've never been to. Rwanda is still a country recovering from genocide, 500,000 people killed in the mid-90s. Criticised by the UK for its human rights record last year, this may seem an odd choice of partner to entrust with protecting the human rights of traumatised and vulnerable asylum seekers. Israel scrapped a similar arrangement with Rwanda in 2018 after it emerged that asylum seekers ended up in the hands of people traffickers. There were accounts of rape, torture, enslavement and murder as desperate refugees headed north to try to get into Europe across the Mediterranean. Opposition politicians were united in condemning the deal.
They're unworkable, they're extortionate, they're going to cost taxpayers billions of pounds, and they just reflect a Prime Minister who's got no grit, no answers.
It's clearly not going to work. There's no evidence that it will stop these appalling organised criminal gangs, these traffickers, and it's going to be incredibly expensive as well.
I think it's horrendous. I think it's a pathetic, desperate and cruel political stunt. I think it's going to do real harm to refugees and asylum seekers. It will do absolutely no harm to people smugglers.
The hope to stop the small boats. The ambition potentially for tens of thousands of people to be packed onto planes to Rwanda. The reality, a government expecting a challenge in the courts, seeking to scupper this proposal before it begins. Mark Easton, BBC News, Rwanda.
Well, one of the main aims of the policy is to stop people from making the treacherous journey across the Channel. More than 28,500 people crossed in small boats last year. That's almost a tenfold increase on 4 years ago. This year looks set to exceed that number. So far, over 4,500 people have arrived. Official figures show that just over half of all asylum claims are successful. Our correspondent Jessica Parker has been speaking to some of those who are planning to cross the Channel and has sent this report from Dunkirk.
A makeshift village in northern France, sandwiched between woods and railway tracks. Men collect firewood, children play games. The long wait for a better life than this. Mr Johnson said the scheme would be uncapped. It was literally news to these men that some who reach England could be sent to Rwanda. Shafi, who tells me he fled Afghanistan, says it's double standards.
They're welcoming all the Ukrainian people in their houses. We heard that, everyone in the world, they're welcoming Ukrainians in their house.
We're asked a lot of questions. Who will they send? When? Why?
So everyone wants a better future, and if they take us to Rwanda, what are we going to do there? It's a lot worse place than Afghanistan, right? There is no future for us in Rwanda.
Will that make you think twice about trying the journey?
No, we have no other choice. We will still go there. We will still try our best. Let's see what happens there. We will still try to go there.
There are women and children here, but it is mostly single men. And they're not the only ones taken aback by the government's plans.
Rwanda? Vraiment?
You can see what local volunteer Marie thinks.
It's horrible and absurd. It doesn't make sense. It makes absolutely no sense. Why would the government do something like that?
In the UK, it's expected these plans will be challenged in the courts, but people in Dover say a solution is needed.
I feel for them. They're human beings like us, and they're fleeing from their circumstances, but equally, we can't carry on forever taking everyone.
Obviously, they've got to go somewhere. So, yeah, perhaps it would be a better idea, rather than them coming straight into Dover all the time.
Those living in the camp are on long journeys. The English language, family, reasons frequently given about why they want to reach the UK. Hundreds of people are living in this camp just outside Dunkirk in northern France, and they don't seem, those we've spoken to, particularly deterred by the idea that they could be sent to Rwanda if they reach the UK. They accept it might be a risk, but what they tell us is they've already risked so much to get this far. And many still willing to risk their lives crossing the English Channel, a border force ship bringing more people ashore today. Safe for now, but with uncertain futures.
So this is the lounge at the moment. What I was thinking was that this could be converted to a bedroom.
Natalie's turning her living room into a home for Ukrainian refugees.
So in terms of the sofa and everything, all of this we can just move out of the room, and then we'll look to buy a double bed, king-size bed, something like that to go in here.
She's even turning her utility room into a storage area for their food.
We could completely clear this area out, clear all of the cupboards out, even put a small fridge under the worktop. So it could just sort of provide that area for someone just to have a little bit of space.
And supporting Ukrainians who've been through...
Michael Gove, the Housing and Community Secretary, is hoping thousands of people like Natalie will also welcome Ukrainians into their homes.
Our country has a long and proud history of supporting the most vulnerable during their darkest hours. We took in refugees fleeing Hitler's Germany, those fleeing repression in Idi Amin's Uganda, and of course those who fled the atrocities of the Balkan Wars. More recently, we've offered support to those fleeing persecution in Syria, Afghanistan and Hong Kong. And we're doing so again with Homes for Ukraine.
But Labour's Lisa Nandy criticised the government scheme for what she called excessive bureaucracy.
We are really deeply concerned about the lack of urgency. He went on TV yesterday to claim that Ukrainians could be here by Sunday, but he's just told us that they will still need a visa under the current application process. These are 50-page forms that have to be completed online, asking people who have fled with nothing to find an internet cafe to upload documents they don't have.
In the Homes for Ukraine scheme, hosts will be expected to offer accommodation for Ukrainians for a minimum of 6 months, and they'll receive £350 tax-free for every month they house a refugee or a family. Unlike previous schemes, Ukrainians do not need to have any links to the UK, and there will be no limit on the number who can come here. Refugees will have access to the NHS and other public services, and their children will be able to attend local schools. Natalie's husband Stefan said taking in someone was an easy decision to make.
When we saw what these people are going through, we thought if we were in their shoes, we'd want someone to offer to give them somewhere to be safe and have a roof over their heads.
Well, it could happen to any of us, couldn't it? You just don't know what's around the corner.
Correct. So it's just it could be any of us.
With so many people here in the UK wanting to help, whether the government will be able to meet the logistical challenge is yet to be seen. Anna Adams, BBC News, Upminster.
We hope and pray that God gives you the strength and courage to face these awful times. We stand with you.
She's collected hundreds of messages and raised thousands of pounds to send to Ukraine, but Lisa Kay wants to do more. This room is all ready for 2 children. A British family who fled from Kiev will arrive at her home in Warwickshire this weekend. She wants to give her other spare rooms to Ukrainians.
I'd like to be able to look after them. I think they've been through absolute hell. And for me, it makes me feel guilty that I can just sit here and have all this space. And then there's those people that have had to leave, like their dads and brothers and uncles and grandfathers behind. It just really, really gets to me.
The government says it'll set out more detail in the coming days about how British people will be able to offer up their homes to Ukrainian refugees. But it follows heavy criticism of the Home Office for the delays and red tape being faced by people trying to get into this country. At this refugee support centre, they have many questions.
We don't know the logistics of this scheme yet. And we don't know the eligibility criteria, how long they will be able to stay in the UK, hopefully access to employment, study and benefits, and even better refugee status, support to find employment, registering with the GPs, school places for their children.
This is my granddad, grandma, my aunt.
The details will matter to families like Julia's. Their hometown now in Russian control. They escaped to Poland and are waiting to see if the UK will allow them in. She has this plea.
Please make it faster because it's very time-consuming for elderly people and people with children, like in my case. Let them come, and then I'm sure that all of the documentation can be handed in the UK already, where they're safe.
The British public have already shown their willingness to help. Will that extend to opening their homes to those most in need? Becky Johnson, Sky News in the West Midlands.